figure out, Judge McAfee, if that would be Fani Willis would be on the case moving forward or not due to this timeline of a relationship with the special counsel, excuse me. Let's bring into the conversation right now, friend of the program, Neama Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor. Thank you again for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And of course, we were potentially expecting a decision today. That's kind of why we set this whole thing up, but a decision has not come. Potentially the 2-week mark is tomorrow. How strict of a deadline is 2 weeks there when Judge McAfee says that about a ruling coming?
Andy, it's not strict at all, and really it's the judge's own timeline that we're dealing with. We thought we might get a decision from the bench a couple weeks ago, but it's not surprising that McAfee wants to issue a written order. No matter what the decision is, probably going to be appealed, and obviously the prosecution rarely does appeal, but if they're disqualified from the case entirely, I think that's something that Willis will do. And of course, if Trump and the co-defendants there, they lose this disqualification motion, I wouldn't be surprised if they appeal as well.
All right, and just give me the outcomes of it. Let's say Judge McAfee does disqualify Fani Willis. What happens? And if he doesn't disqualify her, what happens there as well?
So if disqualification happens, there's a state agency there in Georgia that would be responsible for reassigning the case to another district attorney's office, or the Georgia State Attorney General could take over. But essentially, you'd have a whole new set of prosecutors. And the reason disqualification is important, we're not just talking about Fani Willis or Nathan Wade. And Willis probably wouldn't be personally handling the case herself anyway, in terms of making opening statements or closing arguments or examining or cross-examining witnesses. But really, her whole office would be disqualified because there's a financial conflict of interest. So another set of prosecutors would have to pick up the case and start over. And this isn't an easy case. There's a lot of co-defendants, a lot of criminal defense lawyers, and it's a complicated case because it's not a simple case by any stretch in terms of the legal theories and the RICO charges. So it would really set the case back, and there's probably no way we get a trial until 2025 at the earliest.
That is a very good point. Of course, we were talking about it yesterday, how Fani Willis kind of threw the kitchen sink at the former president and also all of those, 18 or so co-defendants that kind of dwindled down a little bit right now as well. And you mentioned the fact that if she is disqualified and it would go to another DA's office, is there a possibility, if that's the case, that all the charges will be dropped entirely?
Potentially, yes. Obviously, these types of decisions are subject to prosecutorial discretion. So, the example I like to give is the other Trump trial that was supposed to start in a couple weeks, less than a couple weeks, but looks like it's going to be pushed back at least a month. And that's the New York hush money case. Well, of course, Alvin Bragg was the first person to charge a former president, and he's the current Manhattan district attorney. But his predecessor, Cyrus Vance Jr., also a Democrat, rejected that case. So it's possible for another prosecutor to take a look at the case and decide not to move forward. There's no guarantee that if disqualification happens, that the case will continue.
And that would be certainly a big win for Trump, and I'm sure he would sing that loud and clear there for the people as he goes into 2024 as well. My next question for you is just kind of about the timeline as well. You said there's no necessarily hard timeline for it. Is there a ballpark, though? Because he put 2 weeks on it. Does it have to come within the next weeks, or can he take as much time as he needs?
He can't take as much time as he needs, but normally judges, they're ordinary people. So if they tell the public and the parties and the lawyers that, I expect a decision within a certain time period, we should see a decision relatively soon. And again, let's talk about other cases, but in the New York civil fraud case, we had Judge Engeron give a timeline, and it got pushed back a little bit by several days, but ultimately that written decision in that case did come out. So if it doesn't happen today or tomorrow, Andy, I would be surprised if it doesn't happen next week, probably on the earlier side. Judges probably making sure that all those citations and everything, the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, everything looks good for the inevitable appeal that we'll see.
Yeah, and of course, inevitable appeal if she is disqualified. My last question for you is because we've spoken to Jonathan Seary on the ground there, potentially awaiting a decision on the Fulton County DA as well. And he said he spoke with legal experts that kind of indicated that if Fani Willis was going to be disqualified, it might have come before the charges that were dismissed yesterday. Do you necessarily agree with that kind of thought that if Fani Willis was going to get thrown off this case, it would happen before the charges were dropped?
Yeah, some of this is reading the tea leaves, of course, but I'm not surprised that the disqualification motion is after. And this is why the hurdle for disqualification is high. There has to be a financial conflict of interest. So there might be ethical issues, improprieties. It may result in disciplinary action, state bar issues. But I'm not sure we've really gotten to that financial conflict of interest yet. And that's why the judge did rule on the motion, did dismiss 6 counts, 3 of them related to Donald Trump because they were ambiguous. And the judge said, listen, the prosecution, you can appeal. He did make it clear that he would allow them to do so. But you're right, Andy. If McAfee was intending to kick Willis off the case entirely, folks are thinking, well, why wouldn't he grant that motion first, send this case entirely to another prosecutor's office, then wait to deal with a motion to dismiss? Because, of course, that can be handled at any time. So if I were a guessing man, I would guess that Willis will probably stay on this case. And the other thing to think about is the defense wanted to reopen the case, add additional witnesses, folks that, worked with Wade and Willis and others, just to supplement the record here. And the judge said, well, no, I've heard enough. We went a couple weeks, so I don't need any more information to make my ruling, which again leads me to believe that he'd already made his decision and just wants to really put pen to paper.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And we will still wait, and we all patiently await Judge McAfee's decision there. All right. Neama Rahmani, thank you again. Great insight as always here on Live Now.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, thank you so much. All right, take care as we continue on here on Live and Now from Fox. Great conversation. We're going to await a decision there out of Fulton County, a live picture.